I've had the great pleasure to know David over a number of years, and he's an absolutely outstanding magistrate. I have sat in his court and I have seen how he works, and it is so wonderful to meet a person who's so committed, I think, to restorative approaches in the context of the court. Of course, in Victoria, the Victorian government was very supportive, I think, of this initiative and the Neighbourhood Justice Centre. And again, I hope to see developments like that occurring in New South Wales at some point into the future as well. David has worked for a large number of years. He was first qualified as a social worker, so as a magistrate, an excellent background qualification, and he holds degrees in arts, law, social work, as well as postgraduate degrees in criminology. An excellent background for an excellent magistrate. So thank you, David.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I was taken this morning took me back to when I was a young social worker 40 years ago. And I too went with full of enthusiasm and theories and the great approach that I was going to have to one of my first visits, and it was child protection, because I always liked the hardest work, so I thought I'd do child protection. I go and knock on the door, nothing. Knock on the door again, and then a voice comes from within the house. Don't you know, expletive, 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 that if nobody answers the door, there's nobody at home? It's a metaphor for engagement. So the Neighbourhood Justice Centre was really the brainchild of the Attorney-General, and I was pleased to hear from your Attorney-General. I think you've got some great prospects there. But I had a very reformist Attorney-General in the name of Rob Hulls. He went over to the United States and went to Red Hook Community Justice Centre, where he saw my brother Alex Calabresi, where that court had been established some years earlier, after the community had been just had enough of the violence, the intimidation, the deprivation and the poverty and the ongoing crime that had occurred in that area of New York, Brooklyn. And a principal of a school who was much loved had been gunned down in gang violence. He got caught in the crossfire. So the community came together and said, enough is enough. We want some different approach to the crime in the area. And the Community Justice Centre there was established. I won't go into how it all developed and the background further to it, but jump ahead a number of years, because that was in 2000. 2004, our attorney went over there, saw it, was impressed by it, came back and thought, this is a good approach in Victoria, where can we do it? Inner city Melbourne was thought to be a good place to start, or a good place to do it. What was then done was two things: establish a community group in the local area and a higher level group of government agencies. So it was doing it at both levels, doing it at the ground level to engage with the community to see what they thought of the idea, how they thought it should develop, what it should look like, and also to get the support and drive from senior government, police, Premier and Cabinet and alike. That process took a year. It came down to this building in the municipality of the City of Yarra. The City of Yarra itself has a population of around 82,000 people, has 65 different languages, has a number of large public housing estates, 15,000 units, somewhere between 20 and 30,000 people live in those units. It's a high entertainment area. The police tell me that between 5 p.m. on Thursday evening and midnight on Sunday night, 300,000 people come to the municipality for entertainment, mostly young people under 30. It's really the mecca for young people in the area, and it's also a high drug trade area. If you're wanting heroin when you come to Melbourne, then you'd go to Victoria Street in Richmond. That's where the centre of the heroin trade has been and sadly continues to be. It has the highest level of crime, or one of the highest levels of crime in the state. It's the most densely populated area in Australia, and has enormous challenges with disadvantage and poverty and other problems and difficulties of that kind. So it's a very challenging area. But the local government was supportive, the community was supportive, the senior police were supportive, police on the ground were not supportive. It was, there were challenges all along the way to engage with and to get commitment from people. But I can tell you very briefly that one of our strongest supporters in the municipality are the police. They are won over because they see the difference in many of the people that they knew were long-term offenders and continuing to offend, whereas they have changed and have different approach to their life. And they initially highly sceptical, but ultimately very convinced. And if you convince police, then you've got a kind of a feather in your cap, I suppose, because they are hard-bitten, sceptical, cynical group often who are not prone to be easily persuaded. So what was the purpose of it? Why did they bother doing it? Really, it was because of what happens in magistrates' courts. And it's no criticism of my brothers and sisters, it's just the way the system has developed. It's a churning, it's a sausage factory, it is a never-ending cycle of people through it, whereby they come in, plead guilty or not plead guilty, they're dealt with, it's the end of the matter's finalised, off they go. They either go out that door into prison, or they get the fine, or they get the community corrections order, and that's it. Might work, might not work. So much little happened of any real change. Didn't really affect people. People went to prison, they came out, first thing they did is celebrate their release with a hit of drugs, because most of the people who went to jail and do go to jail are drug affected or have a multiple other underlying issues of mental health and trauma, disability, unemployment, all of those things that all of you I'm sure are only too well aware of. So really what we're trying to do is to break that cycle of offending, trying to intervene at that crucial stage of where people have been charged with offences, and most people plead guilty at the end of the day. Might not initially, but after had legal advice and sorted through it all, and some of the charges might be withdrawn and all those negotiations occur, but ultimately it's around 97% of matters are resolved in a plea. So you have those people before me, and what do we do? Well, what's different about the Neighbourhood Justice Centre is that I have access to a number of services that are on site. Mental health services, drug and alcohol services, and a whole extended number of services that are on site, ready to engage with people. Because there's no point giving a person a card and say, well, off you go, you've got an appointment next Tuesday, because by the time they get across the road, after they've left court, it's probably gone. The likelihood of them actually getting to that appointment is remote. So it's really to engage, and it's all about really engaging people at the time when they're in the court, whether or not they've pleaded guilty or not, it doesn't matter. You can access the service at any time, and indeed, even if you don't have a matter before the court, you can access the services at the Neighbourhood Justice Centre. And that's really part of trying to move away from the stigmatising element of coming to court. So that's an important element of those accessible and readily available services that exist at the Neighbourhood Justice Centre, and also the fact that after matters are proven, I was interested to hear what the attorney said about community corrections orders, and that's absolutely true, but so many people that you could place on a community corrections order are not in a place to be able to be successful on it. Okay, so it's the right outcome, but they're just not stable. Either their housing's not right, because they're homeless at the time, their medication's not right, they're still using drugs at a rate that makes their ability to live a life improbable that they'll ever get to their first community corrections order appointment or any other appointment. So they're going to fall off, and what's going to happen? They'll fail, they come back to court, then they've got, well, you know, you didn't do what you're required to do under the community corrections order, therefore it's ratcheted up, and then they end up in jail. It just happens so much and that's, as I say, no criticism of my brothers and sisters in the regular magistrates court, but it really is a great problem in terms of being effective. So what I do is adjourn matters or defer sentences for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months, and for often short periods, sometimes long periods, but really judge it as to what it's going to work for that person to enable them to deal with those underlying causes of offending, deal with the issues in their lives, and also really as part of that is to engage with them. And that's really what I do, and that's really what I expect everybody that works in the Neighbourhood Justice Centre does. Now I'll just take you through a few slides. That's the building, obviously. It's a wonderful building. It was the boot trade school. The boot trade school was the obviously the trade school for the boot trade, which was a major industry in that part of Melbourne. There are literally hundreds of boot factories, all gone now, all gone to China, and it was a derelict building, and it was now been very well renovated. It's a busy street, but took the photograph when there were no vehicles there. I think that, yes. So that's the entrance for you. What do you notice about that? Two things. Firstly, no obvious courtroom there, because it's not there. Purposely put that on the first floor so that people could come in and not feel immediately confronted with the court. Secondly, you'll see virtually in the middle of the photograph on the slight left is the security. Don't have airport security at the Neighbourhood Justice Centre. We've managed to avoid it. And in 12 years, almost 12 years, we've not had a serious incident. It's important. They're really, I think, very important people, as indeed everybody is at the Neighbourhood Justice Centre, but the security staff are important because they're the first people that greet anybody. Nobody likes coming to court. Victims, complainants, respondents in family violence matters, protected persons in family violence matters, nobody likes coming to court. They're all anxious, they're all stressed, and people at security are crucial to at least acknowledge them and to welcome them to the Neighbourhood Justice Centre. That's really first and most important. And I go down, make a point of going down and seeing them every day, just to see how they're going and to affirm their work. Everybody likes to feel that their job is important, and it's not just to give them a bit of a pat on the back and to make them feel good, but it is in fact an important part of the way we work, that they're as important as anybody else in the centre and that they make a difference. And they do make a difference. And also engagement with people, they can sort out and get pretty tuned into who might be a challenge for the day. Because we have a lot of people there, have well over 100 more people there on any one day, lots of people with lots of challenges, and so the security staff can be alive to and to be aware of what's going on. And they move about the centre as well, not just stuck at the desk looking grim, which happens so much with security staff, because they often feel completely separate from the organisation that they're being the security for, and don't feel really a part of that organisation at all. That's the court floor, and you're looking into the courtroom. Indeed, there's the sign over at courtroom. Transparency, both literal and metaphorical, with the glass into the courtroom. A lot of glass and very light-filled building. That's the courtroom. I deal with all matters that a regular magistrate's court would deal with, except for serious sexual offences. The view was that didn't want serious sexual offences to be dealt with at the Neighbourhood Justice Centre. I'm not so persuaded by it, but that's what the view was taken at the time, that not to deal with serious sexual offences. So I deal with all matters. So anything that happens in any crime that occurs, or anybody who's charged within the City of Yarra, then you come to the Neighbourhood Justice Centre. Now, also deal with children's court matters in regard to criminal offences. The youth court, I think some of you might call it, but it's children's court in Victoria. It's the criminal division. Also residential tenancies, although I don't deal with those myself, but initially I used to deal with all the residential tenancies matters as well. Victims of crime, it's unique to Victoria, victims of crime hearing in some matters, and of course some family violence, which is part of the Magistrates Court jurisdiction. So it's a very wide jurisdiction. It's just me. I hear all those matters, and I'm the only person, except for when I'm not there, like today, where somebody would fill in for me. But otherwise, part of the model is that I'm the person who hears all matters. So therefore, I control, in a sense, what happens in every case. And I know the people, and I can tell you, people know me. I had a fellow, I wasn't there last week, or the week before rather, and I had a fellow who I was going to sentence, and it was clear what the outcome would be. The lawyer knew that. Unfortunately, it was going to be a term of imprisonment, but he came to the centre, and when he found that I wasn't there, he wouldn't come up from the cells. No, Magistrate Fanning is my judge. He's going to be the one who's going to sentence me, and I'm not having anybody else do it. I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it does reflect the relationship, and does reflect, well, if I'm going to go to jail, I know him, and I know, even though the lawyer told him it's not going to make any difference, it's going to be the same outcome. No, I know him and I want him to do it. And that's really not uncommon. I thought people would be trying to duck and weave and not want me to hear their matters when they came back, because we do have a number of recidivists. There's people who unfortunately can sometimes commit offences again, but they do in fact want to have the same magistrate, namely myself, to hear their matter, even though I know about all their antecedents and their what they've said before, because they've often said that they really want to change and do things differently, and I don't. But we all know that the road to Damascus is not straightforward. It's full of all sorts of twists and turns and pitfalls, and you've got to accept that. And well, I often use the word, and I guess I should finish, Tanya. Still got 5 minutes going. I often use the analogy of our health. We all know we should be doing more exercise. We all know we shouldn't be eating certain things. And we're educated, intelligent, thoughtful, well-regulated people. Well, how is it then that we expect people who have not had the advantages of that background to be able to give up drugs? Well, why would they? Often it's the only thing in their lives. Their lives are very ordinary, and they don't see any real future. There's very little hope that they see in their life. So why would they give up drugs? So there has to be some other ways, and often what I'm looking for is things to hook into. What's motivating this person? What's meaningful to them? Is it to again have contact with their children, because they've often lost contact with their children? Is it getting employment? Is that what's going to be important for them? Is it having relationships with other people other than the people that they're immediately around? Is it getting into sport? All those things are in my mind when I'm really engaging with people, because that's what I do and what I think is an important part of a judicial officer's role. My colleagues say to me, or some of my colleagues say to me, oh, I'm not a social worker. I shouldn't be doing that sort of thing. That's not what a magistrate's or a judge's role is. I have a couple of responses to that. One, please don't, because it's probably not a good idea if I don't say that to them. That is to be a social worker. But what I do say to them, it's really not what I'm saying and what I think I'm doing. I'm not being a social worker. What I'm doing is facilitating the connection between the person who's appearing before me and the services, and I'm encouraging and supporting and assisting that person to not just get that connection, but to maintain that connection. Because I've often got a connection or two here and there, but they've fallen out of contact with the mental health service or whatever service that they might have, child protection service. They're generally have had contact, but they've fallen out with it, or they've just given up. And so part of my role, I think, and the legitimate judicial role, is to encourage and support that reconnection with that service. I ask for reports, but I say to people, if you don't want to provide that report to me, that's all right. I'll just deal with you in the ordinary way. There's no difficulty with that. I think that's giving agency to people if they want to provide that report from the clinician, rather than, well, I'm a magistrate, I'm giving go to seek a report, so therefore I should have it. I think it's better to give people some agency to be able to determine whether or not that report is provided to me. It's very, very rare, about 1 in maybe 1,000, I'm told by the clinicians, that people say, no, I don't want that report to be provided to the court. So even though you could say, well, why bother, just leave it, just ask for the report, I think it is worthwhile doing that and allowing people, as I say, that agency. Because at the end of the day, I'm the magistrate, I've got to make the decision, and I make no pretense about that. There's no value, I don't think, in pretending or seeking to manipulate people that it's a restorative justice process and I just happen to be chairing it. No, I've got to make the decision, and people, I think, respect that honesty and respect that clarity about what people's roles are, and in particular my role is in making ultimately a determination. We've been pretty successful. We've reduced the crime in the area by 30%, not just because of the Neighbourhood Justice Centre. The police would say they've had a role in this, but they're not here, so I can claim full responsibility. We've also have way above the state average on compliance with community corrections orders, and I think part of that is because of that preparation before we place persons on community corrections orders. Our recidivism rate, both as far as recidivism per se, is far superior than the control group, because we had a very expensive but very thorough evaluation. In fact, we've had 7 evaluations. More evaluated than any other court in the world, I think, both in terms of, as I say, with recidivism per se, but also recidivism as assessed by the level of offending. So, although some people might continue to offend or re-offend, the actual level of offending is far less serious than what they were offending at previously. And I haven't really talked about, and I'm going to provide to you a USB stick which looks at really some of the other aspects of what we're doing, because we do a lot of other things in the Neighbourhood Justice Centre. We have a strong community engagement team, but really everybody's expected to be involved in community engagement. We try and get away from I know it's a cliche, but it's an apt one, the silo approach of, this is my job, this is what I do, I'm a lawyer and I don't do anything else. No. you've got to extend yourself a bit. You've got to do a few other things. And so, for example, the registrar, that is the persons who are the administrators for the court, they go down each week and assist in the local soccer program, which is mostly Sudanese young men, on one of their local estates. And that's, you know, their contribution, not their only contribution, but it is a major contribution that they make to community engagement. So I try and get out. In fact, I do get out. I get a bit cross if I don't get out at least once a month to some community group or community facility. Not to do very much, but it just shows, I think, a respect for the community and a connection to the community, and people are always appreciative of a judicial officer coming out and speaking to them. I think that that's, you know, I've never been approached, never been asked about a case, never been leant upon or done anything of that kind. It's been no difficulties at all in regard to that side. Encourage my brothers and sisters to do that, and I suppose maybe because of my background I feel more comfortable about doing it and easy to do it, or greater ease of doing it. But I think it's also just breaking down some of those barriers about how judges, magistrates work to make it more understandable by the community, because, you know, it's been my belief and my impression and what people have told me that magistrates, judges just make up the decision in sentencing out of the air rather than, you know, have a considered, thoughtful approach to it.
Thank you, David.
Thanks. Pleasure. Thanks.
Now, I must say, I found out the other night that David, in terms of his community outreach, actually teaches young people how to drive occasionally on a Saturday morning who wouldn't otherwise be taught. And I was so impressed because his son is the same age as my daughter, so not only is he taught his own children how to drive, but he actually volunteers his time. And I think that really speaks to the sort of person that David is. It's about how you build a community, about how you build, I think, a very collaborative court. And I think that's the really interesting part around this court, in that people collaborate with one another. You've got drug, alcohol, housing, financial literacy folks. You've got the police as well as legal aid working together in shared spaces and actually getting on. It's an extraordinary court, and I thank David for doing that both in his area and sharing a little bit about it with us. Now, I do have a small gift.
Oh, thank you.
There you go.
Thanks.
And we probably have time, I hate to say for one question, we're running a little bit over time, but one question?
I just want to make one remark in regard to that, and then I'll take your question. You know, we don't want to be Pollyanna-ish about it. You know, it doesn't all work swimmingly well and everybody's happy. You know, it's kumbaya. No, you know, there's quite a bit of conflict that goes on, but we endeavour to be open, frank, honest about it and have the discussion. And there's lots of discussions and there's lots of differences. And, you know, it's an adversarial place, a court. You know, by any definition, there's adversarial aspects about it. So, but it's really being prepared to be and being open and honest about those conflicts and creating an environment and an expectation that it will be out on the table in a restorative sense and have those open, frank discussions and work it through. Sorry.
Kind of two questions. One is given that it's been so successful, is it replicated anywhere else, or is it the only model?
It's the only model in Australia. We've come so close in so many places, and for a number of reasons. And indeed, it was meant to be rolled out in Victoria too, but we ran into.
The funding question. So
Yeah.
those other services that are there working collaboratively,
Yes.
are they, funded through health and funded through their own sort of chains, and they come together in the Justice Centre, or is it kind of funded in a holistic way?
It's funded in a holistic way, but a lot of those services actually are contracted in. I didn't go into it, but it's
Yeah, no,
contracted
it's
in so that we still have those connections, say, with the mental health service, because the mental health practitioner comes from the local mental health service, is located at the Neighbourhood Justice Centre for 4 days a week, goes back to her, and is her at this stage, her agency on Fridays to maintain that connection. But you know, having the capacity to be able to get into the mental health system, which I'm sure in New South Wales and other places is pretty challenging as it is Victoria, terrific at gatekeeping. So, but we do that with a lot of services, to actually contract them in rather than have them all employed at the Neighbourhood Justice Centre. But the funding is provided by Courts Victoria. Okay. All right.
So thank you very much again, David.
Pleasure. Pleasure.